Good morning. This is Jason Dean coming live from Film Fanatic headquarters again. It is Tuesday at 11:28, 28th May 26th. 11:28 here Tuesday. Feels like a Monday because yesterday was Memorial Day weekend, so my clock is off a little bit, which happens. Well, doesn't take much. But anyway, I hope everyone's doing good. I just uploaded a pretty long video, like a little over an hour, on the awesome fucking concert I went to on Sunday with some friends. Went to Portland, Maine, to Gino's Rock Club. Got to see Napalm Death, Primitive Man, and Come to Grief. It was a Sunday evening, 6:30. Amazing show. Napalm's always been one of my favorite bands. It was so wonderful to see them, and I actually got a chance to meet Barney Greenway, which was super cool. So, talked with him for a few minutes, and that was pretty awesome. And the Primitive Man is another band that I got into a few years ago, probably about 4 or 5 years ago, maybe more. It's actually been a while, and really really great band, and I just love them more and more. And after seeing them live, man, they were just incredible. But what a great show! So I just uploaded a whole kind of review or talk of the whole experience of going down to Portland, seeing all these bands in the whole day, and it was fucking awesome. Totally worth the price and the whole like just everything. It was really great. I've done usually every time I go to a big concert or bigger shows, I always do a movie show, or I should say, I always do a music show about the whole experience and the whole thing. So one of the other things that I do is, which is the thing that I talk a lot about on this channel with movies, where certain movies I will rewatch them, and it can be, it could be, for example, a movie that, well, okay, a specific example would be John Carpenter's Vampires. I did two shows actually on that fairly recently, and I'm massive John Carpenter fan, of course. And there was a movie, Vampires, that he put out in the late, I think it came out in 98, 99, with James Woods. I always thought that movie was decent. I never really loved that movie compared to the obvious classics by John Carpenter, but I always thought it was a cool movie. But I never thought, or I should say, when I first saw that movie, I always thought it was okay, like decent. I never thought it was bad, but I always thought it was okay. It just never felt like I connected to that movie for various reasons. I always thought the movie was a little bit kind of mediocre, and could have been a little bit more exciting. I don't know. And I had seen it. I've seen Vampires, John Carpenter's Vampires, quite a few times, and so I saw it when it came out. On DVD and whatnot a few times, and I always kind of felt it's okay, it's decent. And then just randomly, I was kind of in the mood to see it again, and I think it was about 3 or 4 weeks ago, I rented it on DVD at Opera House Video, and it had been years since I had seen it. But when it had come out, I had seen it probably, maybe four times, maybe 5 times. But it had been years since I gotten a chance to see it again, and I was kind of craving it. Every now and then you get these just kind of random cravings to see a particular film or listen to a particular band. You know how it is. And I got Vampires and I watched it on DVD, and I had such a totally different experience. And I was like, this movie is awesome. And then I think it was 2 weeks or so later, and I did a review on that experience, like where I had this whole new. I just really enjoyed it, and I had this whole different change in my attitude towards the movie. And then about 2 weeks or so later, I had a doctor's appointment in Bangor, and I went to Bull Moose, and then I bought Vampires, John Carpenter's Vampires on Blu-ray. and I've watched it, I don't know, 2 or 3 times since I've gotten it, and I totally love that movie now. Totally love it. And so my opinions changed a lot. So I am open to the idea, and I do it because I rewatch movies. There's certain movies where, you know, it happens. It can be, well, kind of a reverse experience where a movie that I really liked at one point didn't get a chance to see it for a very long time, and then I watch it again, and or watch it around now this time, and I'm like, man, I don't know what the fuck I was thinking, kind of an experience. So I'm always, and then again, movies that I don't really appreciate or even that I don't really like, I've had that experience of where I'm like, wow, okay, I've come to the table to this movie and I totally dig it. I don't know what, it just kind of, maybe it's your, it can be a lot of different things, your mental state when you see a particular movie. And I try to be open to changing with with the tide a little bit, because we're all trying to hopefully grow a little bit and always try to be open minded. And so if a film is like kind of where I'm on the fence about, and it can be a band too, I'll give it, and especially if it's something that I think that has some good quality to it, or even like some kind of redeemable quality, I'll revisit it and give it a chance. And I'm okay with having a new perspective on a movie, or it suddenly connects with me. So I did that last night with a movie, and I the reason that I decided to do this was there's a Pizzawell who is a YouTube guy who I really really like. He's a really awesome YouTube guy. He's got some really great tastes in films. Mostly he mostly has coverage and reviews of all things horror. A lot of old school slasher movies and old school horror films. He also does a big variety of newer films as well, but he's great. And so he did this show on a movie that I saw. Actually saw this movie in the theater, and I had a lot of issues with this movie when I first saw it in the theater. But there were things about it that I kind of thought were cool. It wasn't like, it definitely wasn't the worst movie I'd ever seen. There were definitely things about it that I liked, but ultimately it kind of left me underwhelmed and kind of disappointed, especially with the ending. But he was talking about, it was an older review. He reviewed this movie when it came out because it's been 2 years, which is crazy. And that movie is The Last Voyage of the Demeter. And it's basically about, it was directed by Andre Overdale, who is a pretty awesome director. He's made some really, really cool movies up until seeing The Last Voyage of the Demeter. I had seen most of his films. Troll Hunter, which is such an awesome movie. If you've never seen it, that movie is so fucking awesome. I also really liked Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark, which is a cool movie, like an anthology horror. But he also did this other movie, The Autopsy of Jane Doe, which is really, really good, really atmospheric. He's made some pretty cool movies. He's he's a Norwegian director, and he's made some very cool movies. He's got a really cool visual style, pretty diverse track record as far as like different genres that he's been involved in. And I always thought, especially with like Troll Hunter, which is such an awesome fucking movie, the way he handles like practical effects and also digital effects is pretty masterful, especially in that movie. So Pizzawell, the YouTube guy that I really like a lot, and I watch him. I check out his channel almost daily, really. He did a review on The Last Voyage of the Demeter, and it was 2 years ago. And this came out in 2023, technically 3 years ago, which is crazy. But so he did a review of the last voyage of the Demeter, and if anybody does know or doesn't know what this movie is, it's basically based on, well, it's a Dracula movie, and it's basically based on just really a handful of pages from Bram Stoker's Dracula, and it's basically based on Bram Stoker's novel Dracula, but it's based on just the excerpt of where Dracula is now traveling from Transylvania, Romania, to England to eventually settle in Carfax Abbey. And that whole section in the book is very very short, but it's really really good. It's really really good because it goes into detail. It's very very short, but it basically goes into the Demeter is the boat that is taking. It's a Russian vessel, and it's taking, not none of the crew know are aware of the cargo, but it's actually Dracula, and he is traveling to England to basically to move his estate and to live in Carfax Abbey and to feast on everyone in Europe and in England. That's like his grand plan. And that is like the classic, kind of the class. That's a real, classic portion of the book, but it's very, very short. And along the way, and the interesting thing with Bram Stoker's novel is it's all kind of written from like the journal's perspective, various characters. And so the last voyage of the Demeter, the actual excerpts in the book is based on the captain's log of how they were unaware of what was to become of them. The ship became doomed because Dracula, of course, kills everyone on the vessel and makes it, and then the boat, the Demeter, crashes on the shores of England, and he escapes, and then the rest of the story takes place. But the immediate story, has never obviously been made into a movie, but it's been touched on in some of the great movies. But it's a very short segment, but it's really, really good. It's very suspenseful. It was covered, it was explored really about the length that it is in the novel in Bram Stoker's Dracula with Gary Oldman, Coppola's version, masterpiece. It was also explored in, well, even in Robert Eggers' Nosferatu. It's they have that segment with the Demeter, and also 1979's Frank Langella's Dracula, which is another amazing Dracula film. So it's been explored, but it's a very small portion of the events. And that's but the premise of the last voyage of the Demeter is basically that whole, based on that whole, the captain's travel log of the Demeter, of them realizing they have Dracula on the boat and him basically killing everyone on the ship, and then the ship crashing into the shores of the beach of England. And so what they did with this, that's the whole premise of this movie, is about that whole journey, which on paper sounds really cool and interesting. But the other thing that is a little bit tricky is it's such a short little, I mean, it's literally just a couple of pages from what I remember in the novel, if that. So it's a very short little selection in the book. And the idea of like taking that and turning it into a full length feature film is interesting, but that also could be like, I don't know, maybe overkill, or like how could they make a full length feature film out of it? Because I think as the that segment is in the book and the way it's been portrayed in the movies, those classic movies I talked about, I think for what it is, it's really effective and it's really great, and it's definitely obvious. It's an obvious integral part of the story. But to take that small little thing and turn it into a fully realized movie, I don't know. I don't know. Like I was kind of on the fence about it, but I thought the premise going into seeing this movie, because I did see it in the theater, um, was interesting, and it could be. And I really like this director a lot, so I was like, okay, and I was interested in it. And I remember seeing the trailers for it, and I ended up going with a friend to go see it. And so I did review this movie before. So again, like I said in the top of the show, I'm willing to give things a second chance. So I had a lot of issues with this film, and I'll talk a little bit about, for what it's worth, I'll talk a little bit about my first kind of review of the film, and then my second kind of rewatch review, if you will, of the film, because I hadn't, I've only seen this movie twice, and the first time I saw it was in the theater, and so last night or yesterday I rented it on DVD. And so I was willing to give it a chance because Pizzuel gave it a lot of good praise, big praise. And he did take some issues with the ending, which I had a big problem with. And he also did kind of criticize a little bit of some of the CGI in the film, but especially with what they did with Dracula's character, where he's all like pretty much CGI. So, and that's a really tricky thing with a film. Like if a movie can be really fantastic and really gripping and just really enjoyable, but if the ending sucks or is not good at all, it can really like, you know, make it into this experience where you're like, even though there's all these good things, you're like, I can't sit through this. Like, why would I? When the ending is bad or it takes the whole kind of build up or of the story off the rails a little bit, it's like you don't really have any incentive to like probably rewatch it. And there's a lot of examples of that. So I don't know. And when I first saw the last Voyage of the Demeter, I there were things about it that I liked, but there were also things that I really didn't like about the film. And I kind of remember the issues that I had, or my first experience, and my first review after seeing it in the theater is has been on the channel for a couple of years. So this is kind of a revisiting, seeing it a second time, giving it a chance, because I do have an open mind, and the reason is I do really like Pizzuel, and he makes a lot of great points. Like there's a lot of movies that he talks about that he really does love, and I'm not really on board so much, and that's great. But he makes a good case for what he's talking about a lot of the times. And the reason I wanted to see it again was I'd only seen it once, and there were things about it that I did like quite a bit. So I was like, okay, I should I should see it again. So that's what I did. I think one of the strengths of the last voyage of the Demeter is the cast. I think the cast is really good. That hasn't really changed. Aisling, Frankiosi, Liam Cunningham, who is a really great actor. He's been in a lot of movies and television shows. A newcomer, Corey Hawkins, who's actually really, really great. David Dismashian, who is a killer actor, really versatile actor who has been in so many great movies and in so many different roles. Javier Blotet, John Briones, really great cast for this movie, and I think you know there's a there's a chemistry that and there's a certain kind of energy the cast has that is is pretty good, pretty solid. Like I for the most part felt, especially the first time, I thought the cast was good. There was some pretty good tension. I liked the atmosphere because, of course, this movie takes place in like very dark corridors on the boat, the Demeter, and it's very much kind of this claustrophobic film with only a few characters. And I liked the atmosphere. I thought the acting was good. I thought the some of the writing was really good. It had some good tension. I liked how some of the kills in the movie are really good, especially where you are introduced to Dracula when he finally comes out of the sealed boxes, and he's picking one, each inhabitant one after another. And I thought some of the kills were really good. I thought the tension was good. The atmosphere was really cool. It was pretty creepy. Had some kind of scary moments. I thought they did a really good job with the kind of the introduction of Dracula, where you don't really see him. And in this film, they make him more. I mean, Dracula is a shapeshifter, of course. He can take the form of a wolf or a bat or, just a demon. He can turn into like an elemental. He can he can change into the elements, fog and atmosphere. And and in this film in particular, he's kind of in this. Well, he's essentially this like demon bat beast the whole time. We don't see the seductive, sexy side of Dracula in this movie. He's just kind of this killing machine, and he's kind of essentially this demon bat in this kind of iteration of the film, which is cool because you know Dracula's character, I think, is such a deep character, such a layered character, such a complex character, and he is a shapeshifter, so he can take on many forms. So it lends itself to a lot of creative ways to show that. Bram Stoker's Dracula, he takes on the shape of a like a wolf, and he kills everybody on the Demeter. So it lends itself to a lot of interesting things with that. And I like, and I from what I remember, my first time seeing the movie was I liked the characters, I liked the story, the build up. I thought the writing was good. I thought the atmosphere was pretty good. I knew that this movie had a lot of CGI kind of going into it, but I thought the CGI for what they were using, with the rain and some of the other things, I thought it was a pretty good blending because I do think some of this stuff was practical effects, and then there was also quite a bit of CGI, but I thought they did a pretty good job with blending those things. And I liked how they introduced Dracula. That some of the kills are really really awesome, and I like how they don't really show Dracula very much. You only get glimpses of him, and I think the way they did that was really really cool. So I liked most of the movie up into to the point of where, by the I guess the third or fourth chapter of the film, they there's the kind of the full reveal of Dracula, and he's like fully exposed, and you're seeing him, and he is like directly in camera. And I remember my first time seeing the movie, I didn't really like that. I thought the CGI was, it just really looked like CGI. It looked so artificial. I thought the actual design of Dracula was actually really cool. I liked the beast kind of monster bat creature thing that he was, and he was, it looked a little bit, it kind of reminded me a little bit of kind of like the classic Nosferatu kind of thing, but it was different. It was pretty frightening, but I thought the choice of them going pure CGI, at least it looked like it was, especially when he's completely shown at one point where he's on the ship. I thought their choice of going CGI, totally CGI base, was a really bad mistake. Because I felt like all of a sudden it just looked so artificial. He looked like, even though the design was really cool, and his presence was cool as a character, I thought it looked like a video game all of a sudden. Totally looked like a video game. And I remember that having such a big effect on me when I saw the movie. And then I thought the ending, like, I thought there was a lot of great tension, a lot of good suspense, and some really awesome atmosphere, really great kills. It was pretty creepy, it was kind of scary. And I thought, but once it got to the point of where they fully revealed Dracula, and it seemed to be this totally CGI produced character, that really was a big problem for me. And I was like, oh man, why did they decide to go to that route? You know, and the first thing that came to mind, and it came to my mind the other night, or last night, was, when you're making movies or a project that's a reimagining or based on things that have come out before, and with previous work, previous films like Coppola's and Robert, well, not Eggers, but Coppola's and Franco Langella's film, of where there's been some really great versions of Dracula, and especially with Coppola, why couldn't you use that as like, wow, okay, this movie really set the bar high. And when you watch Frank Coppola's Dracula, there's virtually no CGI. Well, there is. I mean, that came out quite a few years ago. There is computer generated graphics to a degree, but the costume design, the various creature designs, all of those things are all practical. Like, that's Gary Oldman, and that's a guy or girl in a costume, and it's all organic. It's all practical effects. It's a real thing, and the design in Coppola's of Dracula and his various kind of manifestations are absolutely incredible. When he changes into the bat creature, he changes into, when he is Dracula, the sexy, seductive Dracula, and then when he becomes the werewolf, and then he turns into this fog and mist. It's absolutely incredible, and it's all practical. And I just don't know why. I feel like if they did that and they decided to go that route with the actual, with Dracula in this case, where they decided to like make it more practical effects based, and where using that movie even as a reference, Coppola's, this movie would have been so much better. Yeah, I just think it looks like a video game. It looks like you're playing Resident Evil or something. And it kind of took me out of the movie because it was all this build up and suspense, and then it was like, you know, I felt after that happened, and then there's a series of circumstances of where they are now, and the whole time frame of the movie takes place over, again, the based on the travelogue of the captain of the Demeter, and the whole kind of time frame is about, maybe 4 or 5 months at sea. And I felt like after you see Dracula, and it just seems so CGI. It felt like when it's getting closer to the end of the film, and now the last remaining crew, they're trying to kill Dracula because they realize what's happening, and they're trying to kill him and down the ship to prevent him from coming to England. I felt like when it got to that whole area, I felt like so much of the steam ran out of the story, and I felt like there wasn't as much suspense anymore. And it just got a little bit. It got a little bit silly after a while. Like it was still good, but I just felt like it lost a little bit of steam. That was kind of how I felt. And then I thought, this is more or less how I felt the first time I saw this in the movies, because I saw it in the theater. And then I remember when I first saw this, the ending I thought for this movie was absolutely terrible. The actual ending, because it was totally taking, artistic liberties with the story, basing it on things that just did not happen in the story, which is fine. Can't be a gatekeeper about everything, but it was not at all what happens in the book, and they just totally set it up to make it into a sequel. And the ending I thought was absolutely ridiculous and it was so ham-handed. That was how I felt overall the first time I saw this movie. And so I rewatched this movie last night on DVD. Pretty good quality. It was a collector's edition. So I rewatched The Last Voyage of the Demeter, and I have to say, my opinion is kind of the same. It's kind of the same. It's changed a little bit, and maybe I would say I kind of enjoyed this movie a little bit more. But overall, those the same kind of. I mean, again, it's just a little old me. I don't know anything. I'm not anyone special. I'm not a fucking paid film critic, and I just love movies, and I just talk about movies, and because I love movies, and that's really it. Um, and my tastes are, you know, maybe a little bit stranger than other people's tastes, and my tastes are kind of my ass, and that's fine. But I will say, after watching it the second time last night, my opinions around the movie haven't really changed all that much. It's kind of the same. I think in areas where I feel like it has kind of changed maybe a little bit more was I kind of enjoyed the story and the movie a little bit more, I guess. I guess you could say. I thought that was pretty good. I think the first couple acts, you know, it's, basically 4 acts or so of this film. I thought the first 2 acts of this film going into the third were, I was like, this movie's great. I totally digging it. I'm totally digging it. And I'm like, it's cool. I love the atmosphere. I love the really dark vibe that this film has. I love this, like, the sense of doom, because and I think they did a pretty good job, because you do know, if anybody's read the book or seen any of the Dracula films, you know that everybody's gonna fucking die. And I thought they still did a good job with that. Even though way in advance that, like, this is a doomed vessel and everybody's gonna fucking die. And Dracula is going to survive this. So, but I thought even with that, because that can be daunting from filmmakers' perspective, I thought they did a good job with that, and I found myself probably overall enjoying the story a little bit more. But I will say that the other factors, mainly the CGI aspect with Dracula, um, kind of was the same thing, And I'm not trying to be nitpicky. I will say I did kind of enjoy this movie a little bit more, but I do think, and I watched it last night, and the more I think about it, I kind of feel like the same thing about the CGI and the big reveal of Dracula. I kind of feel the same way. All before you get to see him fully realized, it's really good, I think. It's really creepy as hell. Um, it's great atmosphere. It's, I just did a review of Luc Besson's Dracula, which I was really, really disappointed with. This movie, I think, even though this movie is definitely flawed, it's way better than Luc Besson's Dracula. Oh, it's way better, I think. But at the end of the day, I kind of feel like I have the same issues with it. I think, and I do think, and this was a criticism for when I first talked about this movie, was it does suffer that thing of where going into it, the premise sounds really cool, but how can they make like a 2-hour film based on just a couple of pages that are in the classic novel? Like, how can they do that? Is it going to be too much? Is it going to be like overkill? And I do think that this movie does feel a little too long. I do feel like it does suffer from that, because I feel like they kind of milked that thing for obvious reasons, and it feels I do feel this movie drags. I do feel like this movie feels a little too long. That was an issue that I had the first time I saw it. I think it goes on a little too long, and I started getting a little bit tired of sitting there watching it. And I granted I watched this. I started watching it a little bit on the later side, but still, I kind of felt like this movie's a little bit too long. It could have been maybe a little bit more compact that way. And that was definitely an issue that I had. That was definitely an issue I had with with this film when I first saw it. Was I felt like it was a little too long, and I feel like that's still there. And the other issue, the biggest issue that I had with this film is the ending, because I think the ending is fucking awful. I don't know how else to put it. I think the ending is fucking terrible, and it's so dumb. They take kind of the events of the story of how it is in the movie or the original story or source material, and they totally like redo it, and it's like, with one of the characters, one of the lead characters of the Demeter surviving, and nobody survived on the ship. Everybody died. But then he's like hell bent. The survivor is hell bent on this pursuit of going after Dracula, and then they segue into this whole thing of where he's like following. He knows where he is. He knows he becomes aware of Carfax Abbey, and now he's on this quest to find Dracula, and he actually kind of encounters him, and that's like in the last act of the movie, and it's totally fucking stupid, totally stupid, and it's so ham-handed because it's so obvious that they were trying to make this movie into a franchise. They were going to try to make at least two movies out of it. If the last Voyage of the Demeter, they were hell bent on like, they were already going to greenlight it, and they were going to like, we're going to milk this thing, we're going to rework the story, we're going to change things up, and we're going to make it into, uh, there's going to be two movies, it's probably going to be a franchise. And it's so fucking obvious at the end of this movie that that's what they were doing. And to me, it's like, I think that was totally the studio. I don't think it had anything to do with the filmmakers. The studio was like, oh no, we're gonna milk this fucking cow dry. That's what we're gonna do. And it totally undermined the whole rest of the story, because I thought the whole first couple acts was cool. I thought it was good. It had it had some originality to it. I thought, it went in some cool directions. It wasn't super cliche, and they just were like, nope, we're gonna turn this into a McDonald's cheeseburger, and I'm like, come on. And the ending probably annoyed me even more the second time, enough to where it ruined the whole movie for me. I have to say, even though there's, again, I talked about a lot of great aspects and cool aspects of this film. And I did want this movie to be good. I wanted this movie to be cool because I thought the premise could be cool. Even though it's tricky, that's a tricky concept to kind of like tackle. I thought, wow, I kind of want to see that. It's great director, really good cast. But ultimately, I kind of feel the same way. And I feel like the second time around of watching this film, the ending drove me even more nuts. So ultimately, I would say, I would give this movie a kind of a recommendation, but go in knowing that the ending, I feel, is going to be really disappointing. And who honestly wants to sit through a movie when you know the ending is going to be a shit show? When that's like, why are you going to leave? You don't want to like have that experience. So I don't know. So this was my second review of The Last Voyage of the Demeter. Peace.